Rob Zombie's Halloween. Here we are. How does this remake hold up after just about 15 years now since being released? I can say pretty confidently it hasn't held up as well as the original has after 40 plus years, I guess. But that's kind of a given, right? I mean, the original is just a no brainer, superior film in every possible way. Even people who like this Rob Zombie version can probably agree with that. But it is a movie that I'll keep going back to. I mean, whenever it comes to my Halloween October horror movie marathoning, the '78 Carpenter film, obviously, that's one I'll have to watch on Halloween night. I mean, that's pretty much just obligatory, mandatory. You got to do it. It's like it's like watching National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation on Christmas. You just got to do it. It's the Halloween movie. It's called Halloween, right? No wonder there's three movies called Halloween to give you as much choice as possible. But this one, this remake from 2007, I'll tend to, if not every year, then maybe every other year, I'll watch it kind of in like the November bleed over of Halloween scary movies, where like I'm still in kind of like horror movie binge mode, where I still want to watch as many as possible, even though we're now in November and like Christmas music is already starting. I'll still try to hold on onto the spirit of Halloween, at least for a few days after the fact. So this one I'll kind of go back when I'm still kind of hungry for more. Sometimes the director's cut, sometimes the theatrical, just whatever I may happen to just randomly feel like. Certain appeals to each different version, I guess. But either way, I mean, it's in essence the same general type of movie, and I don't think one version is gonna make you like it necessarily more than another. And there's certain things that each version does better than the other. So I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing to kind of go back and forth and kind of compare in the back of your head when you're watching, kind of like, oh, what's missing from this version? What's kind of different in this one, etc., etc. But either way, it's a Rob Zombie movie, and you can kind of know what to expect with Rob Zombie. And with that, I mean, right from the beginning of the movie, you do kind of almost have to decompress to it in a lot of ways. Just with like all the kind of grungy, gross kind of style that he has, where everyone's like, "Fuck this, fuck that, fuck you, motherfucker." You know, that's just how his movies seem to be, I guess. But I mean, you can call this maybe more, I don't know, a Rob Zombie movie than a Halloween movie, I guess. Which I mean, it's definitely something worth noting about it, since I mean, obviously this came at a very specific time in horror movie history, I guess, where everything was being remade. So Halloween movie remake was coming pretty much whether you would want it to or not. And, horror at the time at least, I mean, it didn't have too many, distinct voices that you could really go to and say, hey, who should do this horror movie, right? Like, not really that many. I mean, not really standout names or anything like that. But Rob Zombie was a standout name. Obviously, he kind of came from the success of House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects, which specifically The Devil's Rejects. I mean, that was a surprisingly acclaimed movie. So he's kind of riding high on that, and I guess really, I mean, when it comes to having to remake all these movies, having to do an updated version of anything with a recognizable title, which what's more recognizable than literally Halloween for a scary movie? It just kind of makes sense that you get kind of double the bang for your bucks, where you have the recognizable name of Halloween, and you have the recognizable name of the director Rob Zombie, who's obviously well associated with horror movies and a certain type of horror movie, I guess, which you kind of know going right in what to expect. And I don't necessarily see that as a negative, because I mean, at least the movie, it's its own thing. It is the Rob Zombie kind of movie, right? Where in other circumstances it could have been, just the most bland by the numbers remake you could ever possibly imagine, directed by nobody important anyway. I mean, if you think of like the Carpenter remakes that came out around the time alone, like who who directed the Fog remake, who directed the Assault on Precinct 13 remake, who directed the Thing remake. Nobody. You don't know. I mean, unless you like are a big movie nerd and know exactly who directed all those movies, then whatever. But Rob Zombie is a very recognizable name. So it has that recognition to it, and it has his style to it, which, like it or not, is his own. And it kind of goes this route of making it part remake, but also part prequel, where maybe the first 40 minutes or so is the Michael Myers origin story, which you can either like or not, which I don't know, maybe I kind of lean towards not liking, to be honest, because Michael Myers, he's just this, mysterious figure. He killed his sister, who the fuck knows why. He spent all those years in the Smith's Grove sanitarium, mute, just staring out the window, staring at the wall, waiting for the night, and that's scary. But here it kind of attempts to give at least some kind of reason to Michael Myers becoming the killer that he is. He grows up in a pretty dysfunctional, to say the least, household. His stepfather is this drunken, abusive asshole. His sister is morally ambiguous, it would seem. His mother is a stripper, and all the kids kind of know about it and make fun of him for it. And one night, he doesn't get to go trick-or-treating like he wanted, and he just fucking murders everyone in the house except for his mother, who's out working at the time. And I guess that's kind of the explanation for Michael Myers. And they throw in some other stuff too, like, hey, he's been killing animals. That's a sign, a surefire sign of something very serious to come, which is true. I mean, that's definitely the warning sign of serial killers. And, they take that opportunity to first introduce the Samuel Loomis character, who kind of tries to reach out to him immediately and kind of explain to Michael's mother what's kind of going on. She's like, what? Michael loves animals. What's going on? But whatever. Who knows? Who knows what's, going on in Rob Zombie's head when he writes this kind of stuff. And then, of course, as the years go by, we get a little bit more in the sanitarium, trying to reach Michael. All the stuff that was talked about that wasn't seen in the original film through the Donald Pleasance character of the same name, Dr. Loomis. We get some of that stuff, and some of it's kind of interesting. Like, I mean, there's an attempt, but it's just kind of unnecessary in a lot of people's eyes, and in my eyes as well. I wouldn't quite, ever feel the need to, I don't know, peer into Michael Myers' psyche that much, because he is, supposed to be this force of evil, this enigmatic shape, right? Which you can say of the original movies, but definitely not this one. This one goes for its own thing, and whatever. I mean, it's its own thing. What can you do? So you can admire it for that or not, or you can kind of just stomp your feet and say, "This isn't Michael Myers. Cancel Michael Myers. This is bullshit." Which, I mean, you have a right to do as a fan. This is the 9th movie in now. So I mean, if you're a fan, it's fine if you don't like it. And it ultimately kind of feels like this own separate film, this and the sequel, Halloween 2, where, it's kind of just this tangential kind of Rob Zombified story interpretation of what we had seen prior, right? And then, they went to the efforts of going back to the original continuity after the remake, which you don't see too often. I guess you kind of saw it with Child's Play in a way, though it was kind of like this simultaneous thing of both a remake that is different and a TV show that retains the original continuity, but they went back and erased every single sequel and went back to showing 40 years later after the original Halloween night of 1978 and doing its own thing. And then, of course, now we have Halloween Kills. And, you can say what you want about those movies. And I have my criticisms as well. I mean, Halloween Kills definitely had some wacky stuff to it, to say the least. Maybe I'll talk about that some other day. But, it was kind of cool that it kept the original continuity, that they didn't, try to salvage whatever they could from Rob Zombie's bullshit. But it's a cool thing to see. So this one kind of remains almost kind of like forgotten, left in the rear view of the overall Halloween vision, I guess if you want to call it, which is interesting. I mean, you can get bogged down in certain continuity of certain parts of the series. Halloween 1 and 2 in the original series, they kind of connect. Also kind of connect to H2O. Don't so much connect to 3, which is its own thing in and of itself. You can connect 1 and 2 to 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, but not to 7, not to 8, and, whatever. But here it's just Halloween 1 and 2 for Rob Zombie. You can get it done in a weekend, right? So there might be some advantage to that. If, you don't want to get all bogged down in what the hell is connected to what. That's fair. It's its own separate thing, is what I'm trying to say. But, I mean, there's things that, you just... It's hard to ignore when it comes to the Rob Zombie version. And certain ways it treats the Michael Myers character, which a lot of people hold dear and feel it's kind of done a misservice, or disservice, I should say, to the character. And I remember seeing it back in 2007. I had some reservations about it, but I gotta check this out. This could be interesting. And I do actually remember coming out of it and just hating it, pure hatred for the movie. I thought it was an insult to the original film. I thought it was just so poor. But then kind of, I don't know, reflecting on it a little bit and going back to it, actually at that time, kind of between its theatrical release and its home video release, kind of a version made the rounds on the old internet of a work print version that had many things that ultimately became incorporated into the unrated director's cut, and still actually a lot that has been scrapped, basically. And I don't know, I kind of thought, well, revisiting this story in this way is kind of interesting, and they have some ideas here, and kind of see what they're kind of going for. But I mean, ultimately, with this and with Rob Zombie's sequel, it's kind of like, did Rob Zombie really know what he wanted to do with the series? Like, did he have like any kind of plan for this movie? Like, you kind of think about the different versions of it and certain things. Like, I'll give you an example of something in that work print that made it into neither versions. You actually see in one scene that when Loomis, played by Malcolm McDowell, meets up with Sheriff Brackett, Brad Dourif, Brackett is actually, when he first meets, he's kind of starstruck by him. And, like, he admits that he hasn't read his book, but he finds it interesting and all that. But then in the very next scene, he says, "I have read your book." And, then all of a sudden he has this kind of, rivalry with him, sort of, he doesn't trust him and things like that. So it completely changes the character midway through the movie. So you realize Rob Zombie doesn't know what he's doing with his characters or how he's portraying them or how they feel about each other. And you can use other examples too, like in a theatrical version, it seems like Loomis dies in the end. In the unrated, it seems like he doesn't. One big example is the Michael Myers escape scene from the asylum in the theatrical. Is this big, bloody, violent, larger than life kind of escape sequence, and in the unrated, it's this edgelord rape scene where he just quietly gets away with not too much of a peep, which you just kind of wonder, well, what's going on here with what Rob Zombie's doing. He's very sloppy. which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for a director to not exactly have a plan. Because I mean, no movie, no matter, I don't care if it's Rob Zombie, Uwe Boll, Ed Wood, or if it's like Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick, Billy Wilder, anybody like that. No movie's going to end up exactly as the creative forces behind it intend to do. You can plan everything. You can do every single storyboard, write the script exactly as it appears on film. Do take after take to get exactly what you feel is right. But it's not going to end up as perfectly as whatever that vision may have been. So a lot of directors kind of release themselves to that, and they just kind of say, you know, "Okay, sirrah, sirrah," and they kind of leave all those hangups behind them and just kind of see what kind of magic unfolds. Some directors are a little bit more fluid and kind of take maybe a more documentary approach and kind of see what ad libs can be done and all that kind of stuff, which is, I think it's a good approach. I mean, the perfectionist approach, it can result in some great movies, but maybe also some movies that fall short of a certain vision. So, I mean, that's fine. And that's fine for a director, let's say. But as a writer director, as Rob Zombie is in this film's involvement, maybe that becomes a problem when both the director and the writer are just kind of unsure of what they want to do, and it's the same person. So that's a problem. I sincerely think that's a problem. And I've probably said it before, and I'll say it again. But Rob Zombie as a director is much better than Rob Zombie as a writer. Rob Zombie as a writer is sloppy, let's say. You know, a lot of having to revisit his own movies and tinker with them a little bit because I don't know. I think maybe not to put you know words in his mouth or anything, but maybe he was riding high after the critical acclaim of Devil's Rejects, and thought he was this great, deep, profound director with a message, and tries to kind of put that into Halloween, tries to kind of get at the heart of what would make a seemingly innocent kid in an unfortunate circumstance, nature versus nurture, whatever. What would make him the way he is? How would the dynamic with a long lost sibling kind of play out all these years later? And let's roll that Super 8 footage of the two together at the end to make some kind of statement, like deep shit, kind of like that, or it's just ends up being like pretentious, artsy student film kind of shit, which it's not great. It's not great, but yeah, whatever. It's just that you kind of wish that with this film they had a writer who was kind of able to, I don't know, get more in tune with a solid enough plot and a solid enough understanding of its own characters, whether it remains faithful to the original 1978 film or not. It doesn't have to be. But then get Rob Zombie to direct it, and then he could make whatever changes to the script he felt necessary as a director, and kind of go with that kind of more casual flow with the movie, which it could have ended up really really nice. It would have been interesting actually. What if David Gordon Green wrote the script and Rob Zombie directed it? There's a fucking team. That would be interesting. But yeah, there's that, and you know, from the perspective of Rob Zombie as a director, he has a great eye for actors, which I immensely appreciate. There's some great actors in this movie. I mean, obviously you can't top Donald Pleasance, but Malcolm McDowell as Loomis, he's great. Brad Dourif again as Brackett, he's great. Lots of people kind of just show up throughout the movie. There's William Forsythe. There's Danny Trejo and his wife Sherry Moon Zombie, who, okay, whatever, I guess that's fine. E.T.'s mom is in the movie, I think. Lots of people, in the movie. Of course, the main cast: Scout Taylor Compton playing Laurie Strode, and very interesting casting: Danielle Harris playing Annie Brackett. So bringing her back into the series in a new way as a new character, that's kind of cool. So I mean, he does interesting things with actors, and he's able to bring some real, variety in the actors, except for, his wife, who's in every single movie he does. But we're just blessed with her great performances. And he has a sense of his own favorites as well. We kind of see them, come up in movie after movie, right? So he'll always kind of cast, even in like smaller roles. He'll have like Bill Moseley or Sid Haig, of course. Sid Haig showing up. Daniel Roebuck, who's going to be in the Munster movie, which I have my doubts about the Munsters movie, but Daniel Roebuck is the patriarch of the Munsters. That's good casting. I think he'll make a good Herman Munster. But I like all that. I like seeing the cast. I mean, if you're an admirer of all these types of actors, there's some joy to be had with the film for sure. I mean, for sure. But I mean, if you want a coherent plot, maybe look elsewhere. The way it kind of moves around and being this part prequel, part remake, it is kind of this strange thing where it feels like they're stretching out the origin as widely and thinly as they can, getting every single drop out of it. But then by the time they actually reach what we are familiar with the Halloween, we know all the beats, right? We know, the girls walking home from school, blah, blah, blah. We know the babysitting, blah, blah, blah. We know the first murder, the second murder. Sorry, I had that taco supreme. But we know all kind of the beats, and it just goes through them so fast. That it feels rushed, and there's no suspense or anything like that, not like the original film did. So I mean that's problematic, right? And then it really kind of stretches out the ending too, where it is just a lot of running and screaming and being chased by Michael Myers, which yes, you can absolutely argue that's the same thing as the original. That's Jamie Lee Curtis being chased by the Shape. That's the exact same ending. But at least with the ending of the original film, it's shot in a way, conceived in a way where you know what's going on, you know all the locations, it's kind of established everything, and it has a good payoff in how it kind of all comes together. There's, kind of like a logical trajectory of where the action gets taken. With this remake, it's very hard to follow. There's a lot of intense shaky cam and all that stupid shit, and like, where the hell are we? Are we in Laurie's house, or now we're in a fucking abandoned swimming pool? I guess we're at Michael Myers' house now. All this weird stuff, where I'm like, you don't know what the fuck is going on, and then tries to play a little bit into kind of the ending of the original, and does some different things there. But I mean, like, ultimately, trying to compare it to the original is a very dumb thing to do because obviously the original is much better, and obviously the riffs that this movie takes on it are only just to serve this Rob Zombie type of movie, right? So it is a Rob Zombie movie, and there's a certain expectation with those, rather than an expectation with a Halloween remake. So, I mean, ultimately, it could have been like the dullest by the numbers kind of bullshit thing, directed by some guy who's friends with the producer or something like that, like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. I mean, there's that, right? So at least we have someone with a vision, as muddled as it may be, unfocused as it may be. We have something, and hey, that's art, right? So it kind of just, I don't know, just kind of goes rambling on with no real sense of what point it's trying to make, much like this review. So there's some kind of fun to be had with that. It's not a perfect movie. It's not not in the slightest to be compared to the original. The original is an immortal classic, and it always will be. That'll be the movie people are still talking about 40, 50, 60 years later. This one, it's just kind of this oddity, and it's more at home in Rob Zombie's filmography than it is in the Halloween series as a whole, which is fine. I mean, if you like Rob Zombie, he does a lot of the same kind of stuff over and over again. He loves to, try to do all this deep stuff with Super 8 footage, like he did with 31 too, and God knows what else. And not that honestly, I'm not knocking Rob Zombie. House of a Thousand Corpses is a real cool movie. Devil's Rejects is a really cool movie. And then this, if it weren't for the fact that you're constantly having to compare it to the original, this would be a pretty cool movie too, I think. But it's always going to be there gnawing away at you, and not unfairly so. Not unjustifiably so. And I think he kind of went into it knowing that, and just kind of said, "Fuck it, I don't care what any dumbass nerd on the internet thinks. I'm gonna do my movie. I don't quite know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna have some fun with it. I'm gonna do some cool stuff. I'm gonna put in some cool actors, and I'm going to put out this daring new vision of the classic. Love it or hate it, this is what it is." And hey, that's fine, I guess. I mean, it's not unwatchable because apparently I'll go to it every other year or so. So there's something that'll keep you coming back to it, I guess. Some kind of morbid curiosity, something like that. So I don't know. Maybe not Halloween night material, but November 1st, 2nd, or 3rd material. It's not too bad. It's not too bad, right? But that'll do it for my 31 Days of Horror. This one coming in a little bit later in November, but maybe better late than never. Thanks everyone who's been watching these reviews throughout October. I had a lot of fun doing these. I had a lot of fun watching some horror movies and revisiting some old favorites and making some new ones. I think I, stumbled upon some really cool new movies and able to talk about ones that, I always tend to enjoy. Always tend to work into horror movie marathons, which is always fun. And I love doing this. I love doing this every year, obviously. I mean, like, if you're familiar with me and my channel at all, obviously, sometimes I, leave the channel cooling just a little bit. I try to come back as much as I can. You know, I found that my other channel, the Alien Theory channel, kind of takes up a lot of time and has a lot more, let's say, demand for content. Let's say that. But I always feel like this is a place where I can go, where I can kind of just chill out and talk movies with you guys, and it's been so fun. Every year, I try to do it, and every year it's really fun to do, and I love seeing the comments from everybody, and one of these days I'll review Night of the Comet, Linux made. One of these days I'll do it. But not this year. But who knows? Every year could be the last, or any year could be the last. So I try to hold on to and to cherish this horror movie October fun as much as I can. And I had fun this year. And I'm glad you're there with me. So I hope you had a happy Halloween. I hope you stay with me on the channel for future reviews and hopefully another marathon next year. But that'll do it for 31 Days of Horror 2021. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, stay scared.